Summer's here, baby. Come on. Here's what that means tonight. That means that there are a bunch of young adults gathered downtown Dallas, as well as Fort Worth, as well as Houston. I think we may have a picture of the downtown. Do you guys have that? I don't know if you guys got that or not. If you do, throw it up. If not, no worries. We'll show you guys later. But anyways, bunch of young adults gathered at Gillies or the Southside Ballroom tonight. I love summer. You guys like summer? I would love summer. I like to get outside. I like to get by the lake, hang out with the family. I love to grill, which reminds me, today I was reminded of this story that I was, a group of us, it was kind of a guy's weekend, and we were hanging at my buddy's lake house, and it's kind of like a lake cabin, if you will, and we were grilling. So it was a bunch of dudes. We went to Central Market, got the good steaks, the fat filet, and my buddy who was grilling was pretty excited about it. The rest of us got in the truck, and we were driving around, just kind of looking for animals and stuff, and we came back excited to feast, and as we get out of the car, we hear him yelling, which is not normal, because he's kind of like an excitable guy, you know, and I think he's just happy about the fillets. And as I walk around out back, it is this scene that I will never forget, okay? He has set his entire deck ablaze. I mean, bonfire that is moving toward his house. Here's what happened is as he was cooking these fillets, he didn't realize that the lighter fluid was under the charcoal grill, like too close to the, like just sitting under there, getting hot and getting hot and getting hot. And as he saw it kind of ballooning, kind of expanding, he tried to grab it with some tongs, and it just liquefied. And so this like liquid fire ran all over his deck and started seeping in between the deck, burning it from underneath, which all that's underneath are these dry pine needles. So it's like this perfect storm of a fire, right? And so this is going on. So we kind of walk back, we see this fire, but then the comedy of errors ensue. Because what happens is he goes to get the water hose, but it's one of those water hoses that kind of wraps up in this box, if you will, that's kind of connected through this other little hose. He picks up the box and it rips away from the wall. And so he's left with this 4-foot water hose, 15 foot from the bonfire as it's approaching his house. And so he turns on the water full blast and he's trying to perfectly arch this stream of, and so this is what I walk up on. He's like, help, help. I'm like, what do you want me to do? And so a bunch of us, right, the rest of us guys, we don't know what to do. There's no water hose now. And so we run inside and we just start filling up Dickies cups with water. And like one guy's just out there spitting on it. You know, we got nothing, right? We're trying to put out this fire. And so what we end up, you know, eventually, like he kind of saturates the deck and it runs in between. And to this day, he has this huge burnt mark. He hadn't replaced the deck, just this huge burnt mark that we saw. But the next day we woke up and we're just kind of praising God that we're still alive and the house is still there. And we're talking about it. We're laughing about it now. And at least the rest of us were. And I go in his cabinet to get a Coke. And right there is a fire extinguisher. I say, hey, bro, you know you got a fire extinguisher in here? And he goes, no. And I go, yeah, look right here, like 7 feet from the fire. I'm like, it's right here. He goes, oh man, I forgot I had that. He's like, man, that would have been really useful yesterday, right? That would have been something that I wish I would have remembered yesterday. And he said, you know, something I hope I never had to use. And as I think about us tonight, I think that's how we view our faith. Like we think, hey, I've trusted in Christ, and so now I'm a Christian, which means I have a faith in the one true God. I hope I never have to use it. And then what happens when we face the fires of this life is it's not the first thing we're reaching for because we haven't been using it in every day. We forgot we had it. We might as well not. And let me go one step further with you. What if you don't? Like if you have a faith that you don't use, do you really have a faith? If you have a faith that you don't live according to and make decisions around, and it doesn't impact the direction of your life, what you do, where you go, how you hang out, how you talk, everything about your life, is it really a faith? Or is it something like maybe you view it as kind of fire insurance, if you will, a get out of hell free card, or something that you kind of filed away that, hey, one day, hopefully that will get me into heaven, but I'm not going to use it here. And let me tell you something. Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, America is full of lukewarm Christianity. And the Bible does not speak fondly of lukewarm Christians. It's a weird time to live, 2016, where you can kind of be cool and kind of be a Christian at the same time. You look backwards, that's never really been the case. And looking backwards, Christians always stood out. They always stood out against culture. They always stood out by the way they loved. They were not the cool kids. And then all of a sudden, it's 2016, and we've just kind of blended in. And I'm asking the question, is a lukewarm Christian any sort of Christian? And that's something we have to wrestle with this evening. And so we're in this series, BC, which just is the Old Testament. It stands for before Christ. BC, which is, pre-2016, pre-Jesus coming up on the scene. And we're looking at these stories of the Old Testament. And we're moving toward Christ, and we're looking at people who have a faith that also point to Jesus. And so tonight I'm going to be in Daniel chapter 3, if you want to turn there. Daniel chapter 3. And we're asking this question, what does real faith look like? And so we're going to look at the lives of three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. If you've heard this story, if you had it read to you as a child, if you have heard it here before or have heard it taught before, it's an incredible story, a historical account. And as we move through it, we're going to look at how a real faith is countercultural, how a real faith is uncompromising, and how a real faith makes converts of our critics. And so I'll set this up. There's this king, his name is Nebuchadnezzar. Historical account. History does not deny this man. Everybody, historians, any credible historian would say Nebuchadnezzar was absolutely a king. He was a real king. He's this narcissistic guy. He's the king of the Babylonian Empire. He has conquered much of the known world. He's moved into Jerusalem. He's burned down the temple, and he's taken captives. But this guy is smart. Okay, like if you look at the Assyrian king, the Assyrian Empire, they were really great at skinning people alive. They had perfected it. If you look at the Persian Empire, they were great at crucifying people. The Babylonian Empire is great at brainwashing people and mixing them into their culture. That's what they're really good at. So that's what he does. As he moves into Jerusalem, he takes God's people and he takes them captive. But those who are royal or those who are in the upper class, those people that everyone else looked up to, he gives them jobs and he feeds them well. And he bribes them with food and a great life. He says, hey, come and work for me and you can have a great life. I liken this guy to President Snow. If you've seen the Hunger Games, that's kind of what I think of as I think of King Nebuchadnezzar. And so he begins to brainwash his captives. And one way that he does this is he just changes the world they know, starting with their names. And so he takes these three men who were the upper class. They were nobility. And he offers them a good life. And he takes Hananiah, which means God is gracious, and changes his name to Shadrach, which means commander of the moon god. He takes Mishael, which means who is like God, and he changes his name to Meshach, which means who is like the moon god. He takes Azariah, which means God has helped, and he changes his name to Abednego, which means servant of the god Nebu. And in Daniel 3, what he does to these 4,600 Jews who are mixed into the Babylonian Empire is he builds this gold statue 90 feet tall. That's as tall as an 8-story building. If you've seen an 8-story building, 90 feet tall, 9 feet wide, and he's going to present it to the kingdom. And so his people come forward and he says, hey, whenever you hear the music, guys, listen, whenever you hear the music, I want you to bow down and worship the statue. And by the way, if you don't, we're going to cook you alive. So just do it. And everybody's like, oh, okay. You got it. And that's where it picks up. Verse 8, chapter 3 of Daniel, verse 8. At this time, some astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. So there's these Babylonian astrologers. They don't like the Jews. And they said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "May the king live forever. Your majesty has issued a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music must fall down and worship the image of gold. And that whoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown into the blazing furnace. But there are some Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon. You've given them great jobs, king. These guys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they pay no attention to you, your majesty. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you have set up." Furious with rage now, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king. And Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, guys? Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold I have set up?" Now listen, come on guys, okay? Let's just kind of go through the exercise. Whenever you hear the horn, the flute, the zither, lyre, the harp, the pipe, or all kinds of music, if you're ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. And then what God will you have? What God will be able to rescue you from my hand? And so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, these three men, they stand in contrast to their culture. They stand out. They stand out because of what they are unwilling to do. In the midst of 4,600 of their peers, all of them face down on the ground, these men standing upright saying, "We can't bow to a foreign God." Now, how are we doing tonight? How are we doing it? Going against the culture or going with the culture? You guys heard this song, Panda? Let me sing it for you if you haven't. Panda, 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 panda. Anybody heard that? Like I tweeted out the other day, like this is the stupidest song I've ever heard. And so people started responding. They were like, I was like, how is this on the radio? And they're like, well, it's a great beat, man. It's a great beat. Fun to dance to. So I was like, cool, man. So I just Googled it. Like I'm just like, I want to read the lyrics. I was going to read them to you tonight. I can't. I can't. I would lose all credibility with you immediately. I mean, wicked, vile things. Okay, let's go get coked out of our mind. Then let's go sell coke. And then let's go abuse women for sport. And if you're not in, you're a little girl. That's as clean as I can make it. But let's go, man. Hey, hear the music, bow down. Fun, make it move, you know. Panda, who's a great beat. How are we doing, guys? How are we doing at standing against the current of our culture? Our first point is real faith is countercultural. Real faith is countercultural. I don't know if you've ever heard to be in the world but not of the world. It's usually said by someone who is of the world. And I know Jesus said it, but here's the deal. You're in the world. That part's taken care of. You don't have to try to be in the world. Okay, you're in the world. You can't not be in the world. You're in the world, and you're called not to be of the world, to stand apart from the world. And so as followers of the one true God, our decision should cause us to stand out, both what we choose to do and what we choose not to do. And it seems to me that everybody's trying to stand out, that no one stands out. Like when I go to the mall today, right, I'm just looking at the thugs and the preps and the hipsters, and everybody just looks crazy. And it's like they all kind of mix in, and everybody's trying not to be normal, so everyone's normal. It's like the cool thing is to rebel against culture, so there are no rebels, except those that say, I won't do that. I'm not in. I don't need to be different to stand out. I'm going to embrace God. I'm going to let this faith mark my life. We stand out as Christ followers wherever we go. It's like in order, disorder stands out. Like immorality stands out. When you're in class and the teacher is holding everyone's attention, that one guy who keeps acting out, who keeps acting up, he's disrupting the entire class, bringing attention to himself, he stands out. But when everyone is acting out, the one person who is sitting still, doing what they should do, they stand out. They're the rebel. They're the countercultural one. In immorality, morality stands out. In a world that rejects God, a person who fully embraces God stands out. Not someone with the fire extinguisher in the closet, but someone who is using it on the daily. Standing out is not always fun. You face persecution. Listen, you probably won't be burned alive. Probably, that probably is not going to, but persecute, you might spend Friday night alone. And for some of you, that's just as terrifying. And I'm just here tonight to tell you, man, it's going to be okay if you're alone Friday night. It's going to be all right. It seems to me that Christians today are the most unwilling to stand out by their choices than they've ever been. We're scared of being identified as weird. In fact, there's a group of sociologists that did a study in a book called Premarital Sex in America. And they studied two groups of men, unmarried, college educated, ages 18 to 23. All the men were unmarried, college educated, ages 18 to 23, but they classified them in two groups. The first groups were men who were raised in a family where they said it's completely okay to have sex outside of marriage. It's completely okay to have premarital sex. Like that was just the theology, the world that they were raised in. And the second group of men were raised in a family, a Christian family, Judeo-Christian values that say sex outside of marriage is wrong. And so of the first group of men who were raised in a family where they said, there's nothing wrong with sex outside of marriage. Amongst that demographic, 23% of them were virgins, only 23%. But in group two, those that were raised in the family that sex outside of marriage is wrong, 20% were virgin. Less. And here's what's going on, because they said, hey, we have a belief, but our belief does not influence our behavior. We have a theology, but we've been more influenced by culture. We're not countercultural, we're more cultural than culture is. My belief doesn't influence what I do. No, I say I believe this, but I do what I want. It's not a real belief. It's a fake belief. It's not a real belief. They said they had convictions, but when things got hot, they went the way of culture. And this is my story. I was raised in the church. I was like over churched. I went to a church school, church on Sunday, church on Wednesday, 2 churches on Sunday. Went to Lutheran church, Catholic church, First Baptist, Cuero, Texas, teen time. Every week, man, they brought in the speaker to do the True Love Waits campaign. I bought the ring. I got the certificate. Dug my heels in the sand. I'm going to abstain from sex until I'm married. God, I take the vow with all of these people. There's no way I'm going to do that. Got in a relationship as a teenager, a toxic relationship, crossed physical boundaries that just got further and further and further in sex. And I remember going home that night it happened. And I remember laying in my bed all by myself, weeping. How did this happen? How did this happen? How did I do this thing I promised I would never ever do? How did I compromise my convictions? And the only way I knew to cope was to do it again. And then again, and then again, and then with her, and then with her, and then with, and then it just became sport. It became the objective. So this thing that I was completely opposed to became the thing that I started aiming at. I was washed up, man. Completely compromised. And it happens with alcohol. Just one Mambo taxi turns into two. Drugs, money, spending, the way you dress, what you watch, what you listen to, and what you do contradicts what you say you believe, and it's just confusing. Because who wants to be the only one at the party sober? Who wants to be the only one that wasn't invited to the party? Who wants to be the only one who doesn't see Deadpool or Neighbors 2? Or who wants to be the only one at the lake in a one-piece? Who wants to be that girl? Let me show you some guys. Verse 16, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. And listen, underline verse 18, focus on this, pay attention. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. Let me tell you why that, but even if he does not, is so important. Because in our culture, in America, we kind of pride ourselves on making decisions, and we call it critical thinking or problem solving, and we're taught it in school. And so what we do when we're faced with a decision is we begin to process the possible outcomes. So we look at a decision and we say, well, if I make that decision, that will happen. If I make this decision, that will happen. Now what's the right decision? But I'm telling you, you can't judge obedience by the outcome or the perceived outcome when God's word speaks to it. And so that's not what these men, they didn't say, well, if we do that, we're going to be burned alive, but if we don't do that, we'll live, so we choose life. They say, God's in charge of the outcome. We're just going to obey, and he will rescue us. But even if he doesn't, we're going to be faithful. We're going to hold to our convictions. My second point this evening is a real faith is uncompromising. A real faith doesn't compromise. See, the most creative person on the planet is someone seeking to justify their sin. All right, in an opportunity to compromise, they begin saying things, well, does the Bible really say that? And I don't know, and what if I do this? And they begin to think about all of the effective ministry that's gonna happen if they go to the bar, they have the drink, or they wear the dress, or whatever it is that they're processing. I know this dress doesn't cover my butt, and even though it's a little tight, it's still covering everything. I know I shouldn't date him, but maybe it's a chance to share Jesus. I know it's the club, but it's the birthday girl. That's where she wants to go. And didn't Jesus hang out with sinners? It's my boy's bachelor party. What, am I not supposed to go? Like, I'm going to be the one that doesn't go to the bachelor. That's really what you think God, I don't think that's what God wants. And you want to be liked, so you compromise. Because we're still, even after college, trying to be popular. Trying to be liked. You're working out, looking good, you got a new swimsuit, you want to show it off. You go to the lake, the music is playing. Of course you're going to dance. You're not even drunk, right? People are taking pictures of you. And now all of those pictures are getting liked. It feels good to be liked. So of course the bikini was a great idea. Even though your faith is compromised. Even though your witness was compromised. Even though you confused your message. It's worth it, right? It happens when we begin to think the Bible is an outdated idea. Is that what it really means? Unless you risk being alone, man. You totally do. I believe my God is going to give me a spouse. But even if he doesn't, I ain't gonna wear that. I believe my God is going to save this family member I've been praying for. But even if he doesn't, I'm not gonna compromise. I believe he's going to bring me some friends. But even if he doesn't, I'm not going to the club, man. I'm not up for that. But even if he doesn't, and yes, it will cost you, and yes, I have paid the price on occasion. I have failed at this miserably. Like sometimes I'm just convicted, and I'm like, am I leading them astray? Am I trying to be the cool Christian at times? Am I standing out enough? I can remember on one particular occasion, I was in charge of planning the bachelor party, and so I did everything I could. I was a believer. I was walking with Christ. And so I rented a tour bus. And that was my grand idea. And we stopped at one place as we were going to go fishing. And we stopped at one place where there was alcohol. And it was, it was a restaurant and whatnot. And we get out for an hour, we eat. And as we get back on the bus, all the guys, they've convinced some girls to come on the bus with us and to go fishing with us. Some of them married. And I stood at the door and I'm like, not today, boys. It's not going to happen today. It wasn't me. I mean, the Holy Spirit strengthened my conviction in the moment, gave me courage in the moment, and it cost me. I talked about it here, and I mean, it cost me relationships. I mean, guys said, hey, we're done, dude. Taking your faith too far, man. We are so out. We are so done with that. But it's been amazing to watch as the years have passed by how God has gone back and grabbed the hearts of some of those men and made them real men and amazing husbands and amazing fathers. And in ways I didn't even have enough faith to believe that he would. He's done incredible things. And so you got to say, hey, this is what I'm going to do because it's right, and my God he's going to help me, he's going to protect me, but even if he doesn't, I'm not going to compromise. I'm not going to compromise what I know to be right. And if you want to compromise your convictions and you want to walk through life with a weak, counterfeit faith, you will have plenty of opportunities. I mean, listen, let's just kind of go through the gamut of what has happened on our watch, right? We've redefined marriage, okay, boys. The boys, like as you raise girls, okay, like I'm raising girls, and as you raise girls, I'm talking to you now, okay, boys are going to be able to go to the bathroom with them. That's going to happen. And that happened on our watch. I know our grandparents' generation introduced divorce into the situation. This is what we've introduced into the situation on our watch. These are the things that we've done. We're working to legalize marijuana, and increasingly more and more as logic is applied to the issues, it is identified as hate speech, which is crazy. Like imagine this, you're trying to lovingly explain to someone that they are a boy because they have a penis and you're called a bigot. And some of you here and listening take pride in the reality that this has happened on our watch. We call it civil rights. And I say, what? Oh my, what a tremendous insult to the civil rights movement. What a tremendous insult. And don't you understand, in civil rights, it was the people who were marching against the culture of that time. Now it's everyone marching with the culture of that time, calling it good and right and true. Now listen, in case you're about to leave or you're frustrated or you disagree. I love my transgender friends. I love my homosexual people who identify as homosexual friends. What you need, a room, you got a room. Stay at my house. You need money, I got you. Let me know. How can I serve you? How can I help you? But I'm not going to further your confusion by caving into what culture teaches. That's not helpful. Praise God for some agreement. But even if you didn't, I ain't going to compromise. I'm going to lovingly teach the truth like these men lovingly. Do you see what they did? They winsomely said, Your Majesty. And it started in Daniel 1, 2 chapters before this. They're asked to eat some defiling food. The king is offering them a feast and wine. And we don't know why it would defile them. Maybe it was sacrificed to idols. Maybe it was unclean food. But they're asked to eat it. And they say, we won't do that. But they don't say it like that. They don't say, hey, we won't do that. They say, hey, can we suggest something else? Like, what if you just feed us vegetables? And they say, well, if we just feed you vegetables, you're not going to be able to do the work that the king. No, what if you feed us vegetables and we work harder than everybody else and we do everything that you ask us to? Will you just give it a try? And they say, yeah. Here's what they're saying. They say, hey, let us prove our convictions are right to you. Give us time and observe us. We don't have to hate you. We don't have to talk aggressively or with angst to you. We don't have to be mean to you. Can we just sit down and talk logically about this issue? And will you give me some time and see if I can win you over? The way that I work diligent and you know, how I winsomely disagree? My friend Blake, the guy that caught his deck on fire, he didn't know where his fire extinguisher was, but that brother knows where his faith is. He uses it all the time. I get to see him use it all the time. And let me tell you something, he's a dad. And when his son, his 5-year-old, was hit with acute lymphoma, leukemia, a terminal sickness, that brother's on the 9th floor of Children's Medical Center. And he said, hey, you don't determine if you have a faith on the 9th floor of Children's Medical Center. When you watch your son getting poked and prodded and poisoned intentionally and screaming in pain and agony, and you sit and you watch on this side of a glass, you don't decide then, hey, do I really believe I can trust you, God? God, I trust that you're going to heal my son, but even if you don't, I'm not going to turn away from you. God, I trust you're going to bring someone to me to spend the rest of my life with, but if you don't, I'm not wagering that bet with you. I'll go to heaven with you and indulge in all the glories of your presence if it means being single the rest of my days. I trust you will give me a child one day, but if you don't, I'm not going to turn from you. I trust you will save my loved one, but even if you don't, God, there's nothing that would turn my heart from you. Verse 19. Then Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and his attitude toward them changed now. No longer bargaining, no longer wanting to talk. He ordered that the furnace be heated 7 times hotter than usual, and commanded some of the strongest soldiers in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. So these men, wearing their robes, their trousers, their turbans, and other clothes, were bound and thrown into the blazing furnace. It's going to great lengths to show you the detail that these men have a lot of flammable things on, okay? They're going to be torched. But the king's command was so urgent, it was so hasty, he's so angry, and the furnace was so hot that the flames of the fire killed the soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace. This is nonsense and rage is what's happening. Because listen, if you want to torture somebody, if you're mad at them, you don't turn a furnace up, you turn it down. You say, hey, cool down the fire, let them burn slow. I want to hear their screams. I know that's sick, but that's what you would do, right? You wouldn't say, hey, turn it up 7 times hotter so they're burned right away. What's God doing here? God is using the rage of man to show you how powerful he is. Stack the cards against me, I'm God. Watch me flex. That's what he said. It's the new JP version. It's what he said. What, you want me to fight a giant? Give me a boy and some rocks. I don't need a tank, man. He's God. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire? They replied, certainly, your majesty. Man, just okay, because I like blew past it. Can you imagine the angst and the heartache that you would feel on that day? Hey guys, we were faithful. You're looking at your boys. I also love the fact that they weren't alone. Said you're going to be left alone, but these guys had community. They were in it together, locked arms. Let's go. We're not going to compromise our faith. But they're looking each other in the eyes. They're looking at the furnace. They feel the heat. They're like, man, here it is, man. It's been real. Let's go. He says, wait a minute, what's going on? There were 3 men that we threw in the fire. I don't understand. He said, look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire now, unbound and unharmed. And the 4th one looks like a son of the gods. That word gods there is Elohim. It's where we get it's the word for the one true God, the Yahweh, Jehovah that we worship. And in there is the son of that God protecting them. He's in the fire with them, and Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the satraps, prefects, governor, and royal advisors crowded around them, and they saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair of their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel. Anytime you see his angel or the angel of the Lord, it's a reference to the pre-incarnate Christ, Jesus, before he was born of Mary 2016 years ago. He has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command and were willing to give their lives rather than serve or worship any God except their own God. Therefore, I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces and their houses be turned into piles of rubble, for no God can save in this way. And the 3 were promoted over the province of Babylon. So this man who is completely crazy, he hates God, and he won't let anyone worship the one true God. Now he turns, completely worships that God and says, hey, if you don't worship him, I'm going to cut you into pieces and tear down your house. And I ain't playing. He's crazy. And Jesus shows up in the fire and protects them. And it happened. It's not like a fairy tale. It's not like this thing like Disney made up. It's true. And so my third and final point is real faith converts critics. Real faith converts critics. See, when people see you faithfully living out your faith, they take an interest in your faith. It's weird. Why you're the only person there sober. That's so weird. Like, why do you do that? It's intriguing to me. Let's talk about it. So you go to this thing every Tuesday. Like, tell me more about that. What do you sing songs? Is it like youth camp? Like, what do you do there? 2 guys named Shane? That's weird. So tell me more about this Jesus. So you think he's going to take you through the grave into eternal life. So you won't have faith in the furnace unless you have faith that Jesus endured a worse furnace for you. That in the Garden of Gethsemane, as he sweat blood facing the cross, that was done for you. That he died the death that you deserve, and he did it for you so that you could be with him forever. Not because of your works, but because you believe that he paid the price for you to enter God's kingdom through his death and his resurrection. And you begin to live out that faith, and it's weird. I've seen it happen. I've got to run with you guys for about a decade now. And every now and then there's someone that just stands out, kind of like, man, that guy or that girl, they get it. And this one individual, before I ever met him, I had heard of him. Because I heard how he was a Division I athlete, how he was a starter, a team lead. And I heard how he continued to courageously live out his faith. Before I ever met him, I heard how he chose not to laugh at the inappropriate jokes in the locker room. How he didn't try to fit in with the bad language that the other guys were saying. That he chose not to treat the other freshman teammates poorly to get a laugh from his coach or his teammates. And I had heard specifically about how he was made fun of because of the decisions that he made and how he wasn't invited to the parties. And as he was a strong, good-looking young man with a lot of things going for him, he had been rejected by some of his classmates and some of his teammates. And of course, as an athlete and a good-looking guy and a starter and a team leader, some girls gave him a lot of attention. Some girls that really matters to. And so, they were willing to come up to him and swoon for him. And he had made a commitment to treat them different. In fact, he saw it as an opportunity to minister to his teammates in the way that he talked to them and spent time with them, and the way that he was intentional about what he did and didn't do with those girls. And on one particular occasion, and this was the story that I was like, man, I've got to meet this guy. His position coach, he played football, his position coach had come to his teammates and said, hey, I want you to bring some violent images. And we're going to put them on this wall to kind of cast a vision for us to be tough and violent and aggressive out there. You guys bring the most violent images you can. And so his teammates began to bring crime scenes and pictures of mutilation and pictures of genocide and some of the most grotesque images that you can imagine. He didn't do that. The coach pulled him aside as the players got excited about this little exercise, this homework, if you will. And the coach said, hey, I need you to bring an image. And when his time went on and he didn't, the coach came to him again and said, hey, I'm serious about this assignment. And the third time that he was inquired about this assignment, he brought a picture and he says, this is the most violent image I can think of, coach. It's a picture of Jesus Christ being crucified on the cross. It's a scene from the Passion. And this is when all of my sins went on him. And so this is the most violent image I can imagine. Let's put this on the wall. It's countercultural. It's uncompromising. And this coach that didn't like him very much said, man, that's really convicting. Let's have a conversation. And my friend got to share the gospel with him and got to walk him through how he can have a relationship with Christ. Real faith converts critics. It may not happen right away, but you stay strong. It's your ability to make it through the furnace will be in direct relation to the amount of faith you have that Jesus went through the furnace for you. How you doing right now? You got to answer the question, do you have a real faith? You going all in with Christ? Does he influence how you date, what you do on the weekends, how you talk, who you hang out with, your playmates and your playground? Is that the scariest thing in the world to you right now? I'll do anything. Don't tell me to change my friends. Like that's a terrifying thought, JP. That's my story. Came to a place where I just can't do that. I can't do Lake Louisville every weekend. I can't do Lower Greenville anymore, guys. I'm out. God's calling me to something better. There's a story that kind of illustrates this going all in. And it's about a guy in the 1800s. His name was Blondin. In the 1800s, they didn't have, stadiums and TVs to watch for entertainment. And so the circus acts was a way that everyone would gather around, crowds would gather, and people would be entertained. And so this particular man, Blondin from Paris, he was a tightrope walker. And his most famous feat was he walked 1,100 feet across Niagara Falls on a tight walk. He was the first person ever to walk across Niagara Falls on a tightrope. And when he did it, the crowds from Canada and America came around and gathered and would go crazy to watch this guy. And just like us, to be entertained, you got to keep making it crazier and crazier. And so he would do it on stilts. He did it blindfolded. He did it one day where he cooked an egg out there and ate an omelet in the middle of the tightrope over Niagara Falls. And on this one particular day, as thousands of people gathered around, he pushed a wheelbarrow across it, blindfolded. And the wheelbarrow was full of concrete, 350 pounds of concrete. And he pushed it to the other side and he emptied it out. And he began to interact with the crowds as he often does. And he says, do you guys believe I can walk across this rope? And they said, you can. You're the great Blondin. We know you can. And he said, do you believe that I can do it with this wheelbarrow? And they said, yes, you can. You're the great Blondin. And he said, do you believe that I can push someone across the tightrope in this wheelbarrow? And they said, yes, you're the great Blondin. Of course you can. And there was one particularly enthusiastic fan right there front and center. And he said, what about you? Do you believe I can push someone across this tightrope in the wheelbarrow? And he said, of course. The crowds got silence as this dialogue happened. He said, of course, you're the great Blondine. I've seen you do it. I know you can. He said, great, get in the wheelbarrow. And the crowds listened as the man refused. I said, I can't do that. And it's such a picture of so many of us praising God, worshiping with the crowd. We love you, Jesus. Thank you for dying on the cross. Thank you for paying for our sins. We have so much faith in you. We have so much faith in you. He says, hey, great, put your life in my hands. Date how I desire you to date. Hang out and fellowship in a way that honors me. Have conversations that honor me. Can I have the time that you spend on your computer? Can I control, for the sake of your own freedom, the way you dress and who you hang out with and what you find identity in and how you spend your money and where you work and what you do for fun and whom you love? No, Jesus. We just want to be with the fans. Don't call us to anything, Jesus. I have a faith. Don't make me use it, Jesus. I don't want to go through the furnace, Jesus. I have a faith. I hope I never have to use it, Jesus. Don't call me to stand out. They're going to make fun of me. I'm going to be left alone, Jesus. It's interesting, and I didn't know this when I first heard this story, but Blondine's manager eventually did go across that rope with him. And I find it ironic because he had spent the most time with him. He had seen that he had done it the most and had the most faith in his ability. And so, of course, he said, hey, I'm willing. And that's what God is calling you to right now. I hope some of you are tired of playing the Christian games. I hope right now as you sit in the seat, see, you can't decide how you're going to date when you're in the hotel room, when you're in the back seat, when you're in your apartment alone. That's not when you say, okay, now how far am I going to go? Right now, you say, hey, Jesus, you got my celibacy, man. If I'm the 40-year-old virgin, it's all good. Make a movie about me. It's all good. Hey, Jesus, I'm not attracted to the same sex. Doesn't seem fair. I think you're going to change that in me. But even if you don't, I'm not going to compromise. I'll die celibate, go to heaven, inherit your kingdom. #winning. Let's go. You ready? You ready to go all in with Christ? He's not making you get up on the cross. He got up on the cross for you, but he's asking you to carry it. Let me pray that you would. Father, in the midst of blazing hot furnace, strengthen our resolve to cry out to a watching world that may hate us to burn us up. Give us the courage to stand out. Give us the courage to take up our cross tomorrow when we wake up in our office, in our relationship, in all that we do. Father, help us to worship you. Help us to give our entire lives and existence and everything for you. Would you create not an audience of this place, but an army to march against everything that is wicked in our culture, to stand for truth. And would you help us to do that winsomely and lovingly with compassion and grace. And in the midst of the fiery challenges of this life, give us the faith to scream out, burn us up.